We start with a small introductory round. Salla, please go ahead. What are your dealings with the proposal and why are you here today?
Exactly. No, thank you, Gregor, and thank you to the EuroCommerce for the invitation to join the panel. So I work for the Commissioner Reinders, whom you have seen, to launch this event. I'm a director on civil and commercial justice in DG Justice and Consumers. So my angle is the corporate governance. So we are in charge about the corporate governance rules in the, let's say, in all companies, and then separately in the financial sector. In this specific proposal, I have worked very closely with our colleagues from DG Internal Market and Industry, DG Growth, because this is a co-shared, it's a shared proposal, and so that way we have had input, a very strong input also then from the Grow colleagues.
Thank you. So we continue with Ivonne. Maybe you could also tell a little bit about the business of Metro, but also on your person, please.
Yes, of course. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't know Metro or Macro? Mm-hmm. You all know the blue boxes, for example. That's
You've
good.
done a good job.
We did already a good job, but maybe some clarification also when it comes to the due diligence regulation. So we are an international wholesaler. We sell mostly food products, but also non-food products. We are active in 30 countries. 15 of them are EU member states. And 95,000 employees work in these locations, be it in the store, we have about 730 stores, be it in the depot for delivery and so on, or in the public policy team like me. They all do a work for making our customers having a, let's say, efficient business. And who are our customers? Mostly we have two strategic customer groups, the HoReCa sector, hotels, restaurants, caterers. That's the main target group. And we have as a second strategic customer group, the independent traders, the little shops that are in the neighborhood and so on, which are mostly present and very important, especially in the Eastern, in Eastern Europe and everywhere else in the CIS region. We have, and I just said our purpose is to make our customers being successful as SME players. They are all independent entrepreneurs, and we do that by products and services. And today we are talking about products, food, non-food products. I will focus today on food products. Altogether, globally, we have listed 2.5 million products. And when we talk about the supply chain and we go into the level 1, the tier 1, we talk about 65,000 direct suppliers, tier 1 only, so to say. When we talk also, because the proposal includes also services and so on, everything not for resale, we talk about 100,000 direct suppliers. So you can imagine that the impact is pretty high on us. I think everything has been said already. Of course, we are worried, first of all, about the unequal distribution of potential of the burdens, liabilities within the supply chain. We see that there's a focus at the end of the supply chain, and therefore we are worried. Administrative challenges, data sharing across the different metro countries, that's a challenge. Organizational challenge, of course, and also the cost perspective. And talking about how we see how we will be impacted, given that there's also a lot of lack of unclarity. Our concerns are, and we discussed that a lot, unrealistic expectations. I think we're going into that when it comes to tier 1, tier 2, and so on. A lack of harmonization. We are concerned that there will be a lack of harmonization. And the third concern would be a duplication of efforts. For example, that Metro Romania needs to do what Metro Germany is doing with the same supplier, more or less. These are the major concerns that we are having when it comes to administrative challenges that make it very difficult for us to succeed then ourselves as Metro and a partner of SMEs.
Thank you, Yvonne. Alexander, you're representing the largest electrical wholesaler as well as the Association of European Electrical Wholesalers.
Yes. And also I'm the president of the Electrotechnical and HVAC B2B distribution in Belgium. So I'm also a senior advisor of Sonepar. I'm sitting here on behalf of the EUEW, but of course with experience which I have seen in Sonepar within the 13 years I've been active there. So maybe to talk a little bit about our business. So we are wholesalers, we are B2B oriented, we have 4 strategic segments: utilities, industry, commercial and residential. We are a middleman between the manufacturers and installers. We are a channel to the market, and we have a very clear omni-channel strategy where we make use of the benefit to surround the customer with the best experience on services and product delivery over the digital, over the branches, and also with the sales reps we have in service. We differ from a one-to-many model, which we do with large corporations. So we have also to do on the customer side with large corporations, which is different from a B2C model, and also with the one-to-one we work with. We do in the EUEW, we represent 40 billion euro in Europe, over 17 countries, including UK and Lithuania. We have 7 corporate groups we work with, 3 buying groups and 4 corporates. We represent 80,250 branches, 1,000 companies. We have about 4 million total suppliers all over, so there is a lot of long tail also. That's also a problem with the new legislation. And we have about 10 million customers. If we take the business of Sonepar, we are representing 25 billion euro turnover, of which we do 10 billion in the US. And we have also about, let's say, suppliers going from an annual turnover with them from 1.5 billion to 200,000. And so that's a very also complex benefit. So we think that will be 60% of the companies will certainly be affected by the new directive. And we saw a report that PwC reckoned that the 5-fold of the companies will be appointed to make also extra due diligence as compared to the ones who do it actually. And this is concerning as well family-owned companies, as private equity-owned companies, as multinationals. So it's a quite diverse model of which we need to talk here in this panel. And thank you that I am here.
It's a pleasure having you, Alexander, and thank you for the vast numbers and impressive numbers. I would like to dig a little bit deeper. Ivonne, you already mentioned the different kind of products you're dealing with. And as far as I'm aware, the own brands are taking a certain part of your portfolio, and then you have the major brands that you are not directly responsible for. And if I have a look to the regular wholesaler who is mainly dealing not with their own brands, but with brands from other companies, so I see a difference there. What kind of impact I really have on my suppliers? How do you deal with that, and what do you think is possible for you as Metro?
Yeah, when you go to a Metro store, we have 30 to 40,000 products in a store. So, and 2/3 of them are A-branded products. Then we have own brands. You mentioned that already. It's a high share, and it's also strategically for us very important. When we look to what is then sourced where, we have like own brands being sourced centrally within, let's say, the Metro headquarter, but a unit in the headquarter and trading offices taking care for that. But then, and we have also certain A-brands which are sourced centrally. But the majority of products which is being sourced comes from the national level. It even can go down to a local level. Because, I mean, I just said before, our customers are HoReCa customers. That could include that a certain cheese from a special region, but it's very popular in one region of France, but not in another one. So our assortment, of course, is composed by the logic, what do the customer needs, and they're potentially also very specific requests. But so we have the A-brands, we have the own brands, we have very local products, and so on. When I say just as a comparison right now, I bring the example of a very easy product, the chopped tomato can, so to say, 2,650 milliliters, and I compare right now such a basic product with a branded product and an own brand product. A branded product, Cereal, I think it's a name from Metro Germany, We have one distributor in Italy, and he's working with 14,000 farmers in Italy. That's behind what we see in the shelf. So we have already a complex procurement, but when we look into what is behind, so to say, the shelf, it becomes much more complex. Compared to that, the own brand can of chopped tomatoes, we work with one distributor, with one producer in Italy, and he works together with 200 farmers. That makes it much more easy, first of all, to have a comprehensive overview, but of course he produces exclusively for us. That means our level of influence is much higher, and I can go into more or take much more complex products right now. And complex, I mean here a cereal bar or something, nothing compared to electronic products or something like that. But a cereal bar has like 50 ingredients. They are then by pre-suppliers, so to say. They get their ingredients from somewhere else, and even the chocolate for the cereal bar is composed of a couple of ingredients. So you see, it's very, very, very complex. And if we buy, just an example, the cereal bar from Mondelez, our influence level is very, very, very limited. You can imagine. If we have a cereal bar, which is then produced for our Rioba own brand, we work exclusively with somebody who's producing that for us. That means, I mean, we were hearing before from Commissioner Reinders, he wants a change. That's where you can actually do a change, because you can come up with requests about how, what kind of certification the certain ingredient has, that there is a need for an organic certification for the sugar and so on. This is something where you can negotiate and actually facilitate a change. But talking with Mondelez, we are just passing on the information, and we have no influence about the look, not about the ingredients, not the flavor, nothing, so to say. But we need also these products. I was just talking about the independent trader, which is very important, looking to an independent trader in Poland, for example, who's competing today with a lot of modern retailers, which are also present here. So he needs such a cereal bar, which is like, I mean, we're talking about consumers' choices. That was what Mr. Reyners also said at the beginning. The consumer wants that. But when the consumer wants the certain cereal bar, you as an independent trader need to have that also in your shelf. But the influence that we have as a wholesaler selling that to the independent trader is like zero. So that's our problem. So when we talk about the level of the reality of influence, that's one of our biggest challenges, that we somehow get this message across. We want to change. Nobody's against the due diligence purpose, but then look how this kind of change can really make it happen.
Thank you, Yvonne. And we are always talking about SMEs, and they have even more power to change that. Sorry for the irony. Alexander, we mentioned already the single market. What are your experiences with the single market? For example, there are examples such as
well, I was last year for the group responsible for private label, and so I worked with the sourcing office in China, and we had to transport all of the goods from China to the different member countries, Italy, Spain, and we reckoned that all of the custom procedures and the certification needed to pass the goods into these countries were always different. So it's all, and there I really sense that if we now put a new law on how control our suppliers, that this should be really harmonized over all of the member countries of the European Commission. And then we saw also that we have no control about the Chinese, so we made this through certification. And so that would be my aim, that we could come to a kind of label which is associated to the due diligence process, where the suppliers need to go through that and then present with a label, and that we could then easily more import these products. Otherwise, we need to do all of ourselves, all these exercises, as you said also, so that would be of help, that we would have a kind of central database where we put all the, let's say, certified suppliers, and which we could have access to see if we have any risk to deal with them. That would be certainly a suggestion of that. Beside that, I think that all of our products are also very multiple, consisting of multiple sub-products. If you take the example of a cable, there are at least 20 sub-products who are coming from different origins. So we should also make a plaidoyer for having just one tier to certify, and this would be, for me, able to, that we could in advance already certify the suppliers and document that, and we could also embed this in the existing processes, as we do for quality controls when we receive the goods, to see if all the paperwork is present, the certifications, the documentation, which we need to also, as if we import products from non-member states in our European Union. So I think this is a very important point, that how can we embed this due diligence in our actual processes we already do. And that would be, for me, a very important point.
Yeah, we raised that in Germany many times to have a safe harbor, some sort of certification, and it was a very tiresome discussion. In the end, we don't have a safe harbor, but hopefully we get one from the European Commission. Salla, what kind of safeguards measures do you have in mind when talking to companies?
Yes, so thank you for that question. I'm already heard the concerns, and we are in the Europe, we are in the early stage. So what we have at the table is a Commission proposal, but that proposal, even I hope that it actually brings this, what you were asking, is still more harmonization to the single market compared to the current situation, where we will have then really different rules. You talk about the German experience that is coming, the French experience, the Dutch in Finland, also in Denmark. It would be different rules. We are working indeed through a directive because it's a company law. The treaties do not allow any other type of instrument in the company law. So this was the reason that it was not possible to do a regulation. The Commissioner mentioned a little bit that, and also that we try to do something horizontal. And then it's very difficult to make such a regulation where the same rules would apply in any sector of the business. So this was something. But even indeed in the directive, we have then included points that the member states have to transpose in the sufficiently similar way, because the Commission will monitor the implementation, so that they are taking actually the measures. So what we try to do is to strike a balance. So it is a balance with the goals, which is indeed then the promoting the due diligence that would detect adverse effect to the human rights and to the environment. Again, and also here, not any human rights and not any environment, only those which have been accepted through the international conventions, where there are hundreds of countries in the world. So you are also, as a businesses, those human rights and environmental, let's say, the goods that are protected are something where the really hundreds of countries in the world have already committed to do. So that way it is, this is an extra measure on the top of what the states are already doing. So this was, I start with that one in very general level, some safeguards that we are not asking to do more where there are already commitments. And that means that the businesses who are acting according to the let's say, compliance of the legislation is very much already then actually complying. Second point I will make there as a safeguard, let's keep in mind that what we ask is a process. It's a process of identification of possible adverse effects, of the mitigating them, or then getting rid of them. So we are not asking, there's no liability on the result. So it's the liability of the setting that process, and that's a normal corporate governance issue. That in the companies you have certain type of processes, and what we ask is that there's a process of due diligence to watch to look after. So maybe that's a second one. Naturally we aim that the goals of the protection of human rights, environment, are achieved through this process that is then duly applied. We still also, in part of our means, or let's say the elements that where we aim for the proportionality and feasibility, they concern to the scope. So we in our thinking, it was that we start with the big companies, and these big companies already are, many of them are functioning under the existing international responsible business conduct rules, whether it's under the OECD or the UN principles for the business and human rights. And we have seen that it is possible. I mean, we do have big companies who are functioning, and it is possible to do that. It is tested in a sense on those. And there is, by the way, guidance, for example, already existing from OECD that is available. We are bringing that in Europe, indeed, one step further, when we are now saying that it's mandatory for these big companies. But it was this choice of the scope that was one of the aspects of the, let's say, safeguarding. And can I say also in this way, I mean, I was I'm very thankful for the panelists in the first panel, because I understood what I understood, and that we know in the Commission, even without this Commission legislation proposal, the SMEs are already now asked to do or follow the code of conduct. So what we have in the directive, for example, this possibility of contracting, is a tool that these big companies who are currently already doing it is using. But why it wasn't sufficient? When we evaluated let's say the companies in general, there was around, under the non-financial reporting directive, there was around 30% of the companies who did, let's say, what we would say a quite full due diligence. 60% did something, and 40% didn't. So it's also, I think that we have some frontrunners who are asking us also that please actually make it that way a level playing field, that it applies to everybody. So that way in general. Then I just say some keywords for the safeguards more. We are asking to have this value chains in the established business relations. So not one-off. So some kind of density, some kind of regularity is there. What the directive says is that the companies need to take appropriate measures. So if you consider appropriateness, there's very much on the decision of the company to look what's appropriate. They don't have to take all the measures that are listed in the various toolbox. So this leaves also under the, let's say, self-reflection. There is also possibly for the prioritization. So not all the measures have to be taken at the same time. The company can consider which are appropriate and what are now priority for what they identify first as a possible adverse effects. And the measures can be tailored. And this is something also what I'm still a little bit struggling what I hear still today. We had thought that it's better that it can be tailored by business, so everybody can look at what is best for their situation. But I also listened today quite much asking something that is suitable then for everybody to be having this feeling of safe. But we started a little bit more flexible, which we were considering as one of the safeguards of applying then the future rules in practice.
Thank you. Yvonne, you wanted to react directly, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, we have gone, I think we're on two steps already further. I was just wondering, after what you just said, was it like 40% of the companies were not having signed voluntarily the UN human rights
they didn't report. They didn't report anything under the non-finance reporting directive.
Because I was just wondering why not starting with them instead of like everyone who has that all for years in place and is doing all the due diligence already. But that
If
is
they
maybe
are
not a very substantial comment here, but that was what was
Yeah.
going through my mind, why we have now in German we would say Gießkannenprinzip and
The shower.
Yeah, but that's what we try to do. If they are doing it already and following the international ones, they won't have many new obligations because they are doing it already, and we use the existing frame, their background.
No, I understand.
And maybe to mention that I was referring to the old directive, but we have naturally now then the proposal for the sustainable reporting directive, which is negotiated. And all the reporting, which also will concern then the due diligence, will come through that directive. So there are no extra reporting additional reporting obligations in this proposal. It is, but complexity is there. That I agree.
So you got the attention of Alexandra. He really wants to act.
All the time. No, one of the points I want to mention also is we are as well a group where, of course, centrally we follow up the suppliers, we follow up the sustainability initiatives and also the business conduct, and also rate the suppliers. But we do that, as Metro also mentioned, on a global scale, but that's only for 45 key suppliers. And then we have a network of each country. We are almost an SME, although we are big in group size. So, and what would happen if there is a disharmony between where our headquarters is located? I would say we would follow the France law for the group. And then, of course, we have subsidiaries in Sweden, in Norway, and so on. So will they need to differ from the group policy? Because there is a national policy which is differing from the global policy. That will be very complicated. So how do you see that from a governance?
What we also so it's true that when we propose it as an entity level, so not in the group level, but we understand that there can be a very close cooperation, there. You are a little bit maybe then coming when you say that, okay, what if it's that country and that country, then coming in the practical application and what will be naturally important to you, how the national authorities will monitor it.
That's the point.
Yes, that way on that one. So for the it will be what we propose is indeed that it is under the it's a national legislation which is naturally then fitting to all other national corporate governance legislation and so on, and it's the national authorities who are monitoring. What we aim then to bring these national authorities together is a network of the supervising authorities, so that in the European level there is exchange best practices. That's something where the Commission indeed can lead and set an agenda there, and so from that perspective, we aim to try to support also the more harmonized than actually the enforcement.
May I propose some ideas around the safeguards? We think there is already a lot in place in some big groups. So I think it would be interesting that the Commission gets in contact with these groups to see how we already apply this, to be inspired for the adoption and also the practice, how we would put this in practice. Because I'm sure that everybody here in the room and also outside the room is totally in favor for the why. We understand the what, but we need to find a very pragmatic way to adopt it. And I think we can offer the know-how and already the experience of the groups. That would be one thing I would say. And then also to the associations, we could also have forums to discuss about it, because in the associations we represent smaller companies who are represented by the national federation, and where we could already bring forward some concerns about that. And this could lead for me to kind of cases which we could add to the directive, and so who would inspire the national association, national member states to adopt it according the vertical sector, because there is also difference between the verticals, and also within already cases which are already in practice, so that this would make easy the adoption and let's say diminish the deviations. And then for me, also a safeguard in the adoption is to, and that have we seen, if there is a long time over the adoption, in the adoption period, it might that action gives a reaction, and means that then along the process when we do the harmonization, that countries will deviate because time is not standing still, things are changing, and if you take a period over 5 years, it's a long period. So it would mean that if there are, let's say, very valid reasons why a country would deviate from the directive in the adoption, that this would be presented to a supervisory board, and then you would maybe come up to the fact that you would really change a little bit the directive based on the experience you have with the harmonization process, where you have a lot of talks with people at the national level. And I think I would refer to the same methodology as we have in IT systems, where you have a process for the changes. You freeze the design, and then when you go along the implementation, you have a processes of validation of changes. And so that would mean that along the period, we would still have the same content over the adoption period. And then I would also propose that we make use also of the European federations of the wholesale to review the adoption process, because we have a pretty much good view, because we're all connected to the national federations, which are in the member states, and we could follow up on that. And then the last suggestion, if I may, is to really come to a strict timing. Because if you have to do this over 5 years, the world will be already totally different, and we lose time. And I think all of us are very much in favor to adopt the sustainability programs to make a better world.
Yeah, I would like
Sorry that I put it
The discussion is going on without me. It's great.
if I may, because I mean, I totally, I'm with you. Timing, it's important, but I mean, all these processes do not happen overnight. And what we're seeing is quite often it takes ages for the national implementation, and then for the companies to adopt, it's not so easy, especially for an international company as well, where you maybe learn from each other, but then have the hopefully not so many deviations then on the ground. So a responsible time frame that allows also for proper implementation on company level, with clarification for all the single aspects or little aspects that are remaining, that would be highly, highly important for us. And you mentioned, I mean, you want to leave flexibility. Everyone is asking for more guidance. We would also need rather more guidance to be on the safe side, because at the end it's on national level, and what has been in mind, and maybe the purpose is great, but when reality is then finally that you have faced like massive problems, that would be really to avoid it. I see the risk, what Mr. Blessing I think has said earlier about the over-compliance and so on. So really give guidelines, that would be very important. And I also would like to encourage, again, you said like a couple of times now, harmonization is really key. That's really key for international or European-wide operating companies, and I really would encourage to have DG Grow like permanently on your side, but also make sure that on national level during the transposition period, so to say, that national governments have the single market period perspective also permanently in their mind. And sorry.
No, sorry. Therefore, we are here
that's
for collecting suggestions and ideas. Salla, do you want to respond to it, or
yes, I can.
then would I continue with further questions?
I fully take these points about the guidance and guidelines, and actually yes, the process as such is long because now we have to negotiate the European level, and we heard from Mr. Voss that, for example, in the Parliament there were 12 committees who want to be involved. So even, I mean, and that's not even in the contents. This is only procedures. So that way it will be heavy, but we are really aiming by the end of this Parliament. But once we have the final text of the directive, I mean, I'm a realistic from the Commission. It always changes. I mean, the Council for the Parliament. From that moment on, certainly the Commission will work on the guidelines. These are mentioned. We have mentioned this kind of supporting measures in the proposal. We mentioned specifically also support to the SMEs, so that's something that what we are working indeed with the DG Grow SME envoy, so there on that side, and we will use also this implementation period for guiding, and that means guiding the member states. But what I took with me already that when that implementation is going on, we will aim to do it with all the stakeholders. So that means also the industries and different sectors. So trying to bring both the member states and then when we talk about that type of implementation workshops, it would be then actually member states and the European level federations. But that is then when you mention the national level, in every member state there will be a legislative process. So it's in everywhere it is actually your representatives in the national level who are actually who will need to be very vigilant in influencing on that one. But these are the issues, something that what I hear strongly today, actually, that where we go. That I yet cannot offer you then in now a couple of first years, because now we have to wait. We have to wait what comes out from the legislative process.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. From our side, maybe a couple more questions. We ask for legal certainty. And the flexibility, I think it's a nice idea. In the end, the large companies need legal certainty. And therefore, the definition of what is an established relationship, what is contractual cascading, et cetera, or where does the supply chain start? Is it the orange or is it the fertilizers or the seed? And there's a huge difference in between. And there, any kind of more legal certainty is helpful with that. At least for the large companies, but they will tell the suppliers what to do. And then there's another question that I have in mind is about the coherence of EU policy. Please just educate me. What is the difference between due diligence, the ideas on forced labor, and then the deforestation legislation? Normally, I would assume you could assume everything under due diligence.
Thank you. Yes, we are, as all the Commission and every policy area is aiming for the same goals. So for that of the Green Deal and sustainability, everybody is bringing their contribution. The deforestation and then the future forced labor legislation, they are how we currently see they are product based. So they are based on the products that have been done from the areas, for example, where the forest has been actually then destroyed. And there will be then a rather type of the import ban. So it's a product that you're looking. In the due diligence, it is the internal governance process of the company.
But if you have a violation of human rights in any country, and then you normally have to find a way to delist it or whatever already under the due diligence proposal. So why do you need another law for that? We are, with the due diligence, we are broader. I mean, so what you are saying that, okay, if we have a due diligence, there wouldn't need to be any of these products. It could lead to that one, but there is no that type of the sanction under the directive that would say that actually sanction is that you cannot bring those products here. It was one of the possibilities,
but it wasn't. It was not. It was not actually taken. So if you have identified that one, yes, then it will happen that it is stopped. Currently, the scope of the due diligence is also small. I mean, the formal scope of the due diligence proposal is still only the big companies. And then it can be any company who can bring it. There it can be even an SME which is separately from any of the systems who might try to bring these products with a forced labor. They are not. Then this SME is not covered by the due diligence.
Okay, please, if I understand it right, then we have the due diligence proposal in place, and there is human rights violation in a certain factory in any country. And you assume that anyone, as soon as they know about human rights violation in the supply chain, is trying to import that product?
No, no. What I was saying that even the small company that is not part of any supply chain is forbidden to import that product.
Okay, I just have difficulties to assume that anyone would try to do that. But that's maybe another discussion for the future.
We are in very much same line. We also really hope that nobody is aiming to bring those. But currently there are some products in the European market from the areas where there has been deforestation. So that's what we are still then trying to stop even in a stronger way.
Okay, what I have the vision for our member companies in that it would be as harmonized as possible, and that we do not have different schemes in place. For example, we had it in export controls, we had a list-based approach, and sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, but we wouldn't so much care if you double the list, but you have legal certainty. Instead of have a catch-all clause in it, as the dual use regulation proposed, and nobody knew what was allowed and not. So already there you changed the system on due diligence, but that's not the point here. I would like at least shortly give the floor the floor if there are any questions for our panelists. Yes, please. I know that you're from IKEA, but not the name, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Manu, yes, and I'm from IKEA. I just want to add on something to what Alexandra already mentioned, so my question would be there, plus a small concern also that we have faced. So you already mentioned about group companies and group members and how the relationship would be. I would add on to that also how would we be treating franchisees and franchisors. Because that's something that how the IKEA model is working. We work with franchisors. And a third category is how does this legislation affect online marketplaces? Because you might have huge suppliers who don't have any presence in the EU, but selling material in the EU, and we don't have any connections there. And why I want to emphasize on what Alexandra already mentioned is because you said that you would want companies to take appropriate measures. And then, so what would appropriate mean? And that again leads to then, because each country, the competent authorities would decide how they check that. We have experience with EUTR legislation, and a recent case 2 years ago for us was for a single product, we were asked to provide evidence to prove conformity, and we decided to actually print out all the evidence. It came to 11 kilograms. Because the requirements what the German authorities asked for the same product were different from what the Italian authorities asked, which was different from what the French asked. So we are not worried too much about what the regulations themselves are. We don't mind also what is being asked. But what we want is that harmonization in terms of what is asked and also what the competent authorities would be looking for. Because if that's not there, with this legislation, due diligence is a black box. The requirements could really go wild, I'll put it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do you want to? to react on this?
For the franchising, I think we haven't seen that specifically in the proposal, but I take the point, and so naturally we are also during the legislative process we are collecting all of this, and you can be sure that there are a lot of questions from the member states. So we are actually with the member states working parties, we are precisely on this moment that every proposed provision is discussed and asked, and there are more and more questions. Commission tried to do. Naturally, we tried to do our best in taking everything into account, but we have to continue that. So it's during the legislative process still considering. A little bit similar on the online marketplaces. So what we have already in the proposal is that it covers also third country companies who are fulfilling the similar criteria for this as regards the scope. So, except that we were not able to keep the employer that criteria for as regards the number of workers, because the European supervisors would not be able to go to check that in the third country. So actually we have our criteria that even a company which is then registered in the third country, if it has a significant market share or the turnover 150 million euros in the European markets, is covered by the rules and the demands of the directive. And that means that they have to also establish and show the due diligence. They will need to appoint a representative in the EU through which we are then able to monitor that. So now whether the marketplace is that type of a company that has then 150 million turnover in the EU market, that it depends on that criteria. So whether it would be covered on by these rules.
I may extend the question when it comes to commodity exchanges, because they are not based in the EU. For example, cocoa, coffee, whatever. It might be hard to regulate someone outside the EU, especially for the world-leading price determination markets.
Sure. That is true. What the EU can do is that we can promote the UN business and human rights principles, which actually set also then for all the companies in the countries who are or further countries or the OECD work. That is something that we can promote, and we have then the third countries. For example, currently we have a quite good transatlantic relations with the US, and we are discussing in many areas, and they are interested in working also in this, let's say, more in the global level. You know that the US has now a system against the forced labor, specifically from the China, from Uyghur areas, where that is basically forbidden unless you show that you had a due diligence and that you can show that the products coming from that province are not done by the forced labor. So they have a system that combines product and the due diligence on that one. So they are also interested in the cooperation. So this is something that we can do as a policy measure, but naturally we cannot then catch third country companies who are totally in some third country.
Yeah. But I think the US are still consistent in the way to do policy, because the system of licensing you also find again in the export control schemes. But we are running out of time, even though it's a very, very interesting discussion, and I hope that we can continue to it. I would ask Ivonne and Alexander for some wishes.
Ladies first?
No, start.
Okay, thank you. So now for me, it's a question. I put the safeguarding. I hope we can work in a partnership to make this happen, because all of us want this to happen, but we want to happen this more efficiently and clearly from a legal perspective. And also what I would recommend is that it's going to be part of all of the due diligences we do. And then we would also avoid double work. So that all of us, that we would have the reporting on the due diligence processes somewhere centrally, where we can consult that as a database to don't do double work.
I can agree with efficient and very comprehensive and inclusive approaches. That is very important. I would like also to say, I think supply chain is sometimes being seen as a linear process. I think the reality is that we have supply trees, and this needs to be respected also in the process in the upcoming process. I would like to highlight once again, Tier 1. This is where companies can do a change. Like if you see the different stages within the supply tree, so to say, look where the change that is going to be initiated or that is wished, look how this can be implemented, and do not focus so much on the administration behind, which might undermine all the efforts that could be done for a certain goal. And third point would be, and it's connected to inclusivity and efficiency, have the single market in mind, and be also realistic, not only about the supply trees or chains, but also how directives, how differently they are than in reality being implemented in the countries. And so that we are not talking about something we wish, but work on something that is likely to happen, and we would like to prevent that.
Salla. Now, I think we totally agree with the objective. The challenge will be how can we keep also the difficult markets and countries in the supply chain, and how can we support the SMEs to fulfill the requirements and keep in the line. What do you need from us? What kind of support, information that we can manage it?
Okay. I would already thank you. For example, yesterday you presented the study or survey about the triple transition, and then there were some key lessons there. One was that it's also an opportunity. So I mean, that is a good message. That's what we are also saying at how we have seen that in the long-term business perspective, the sustainable, responsible business conduct affects in positive way. So that way we are going to the same messages. Something interesting. You also said that study said the key lesson that you have to bring it to the priority of the CEOs. So to the boards, to the CEOs. And actually this is also what the directive is saying. The directive is saying that it is the boards, the highest level, who is in charge of this one. And so that way it is that those who are doing the strategic decisions in the businesses, in the companies, will be also responsible. And that way, that's where we are also doing something common, at least what was the lesson from your study. So this is something that we can continue, that will continue benefiting us. Anything on that one? And I certainly indeed take already then the greetings on any events like this with me towards then the working also inside of the Commission during the legislative negotiation period and in the future implementation period.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we have a lot of years now coming where we can intensify our exchange. Thanks a lot. And then I give Christelle the floor. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.